Welcome everyone to this last session of the Civil 7 Summit. It's a pleasure to see you all once again here. We have seen Infinite, an artwork that exemplifies our collective aspiration for global peace. Infinite was created by artist Marco Conti Sikic as part of the UN SDG campaign's Unite to Act digital art exhibition in collaboration with Code Green. Wrapped in a sphere of unity and set against the grandeur of the cosmos, the artwork highlights the golden thread of peace, precious, enduring, and foundational aspect of our shared prosperity. And I think this video clearly set the scene for our discussion and conversation today with my distinguished panelists. I have here Baroness Dayon Ako-Adunvo, a warm welcome, Baroness, Sean Conner, and Lisa Clark. I will introduce them in a little while by leaving them the floor. And we have also Cardinal Matteo Maria Zuppi connected online. But before going into details and starting with this conversation, I would like also to read the message we received from the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs and Deputy Prime Minister Antonio Tajani, who sent greetings, remarks, because for other institutional commitments, unfortunately, he won't be here with us. So let me just address these remarks from on his behalf. I thank the organizers of the Civil 7 Summit for this important moment of discussion, and I extend a warm greeting to all the participants. In the current context, characterized by challenges that transcend national borders, such as the energy transition, climate change, food insecurity, violent extremism, and terrorism, civil society plays an irreplaceable role. It creates a bridge between communities and institutions everywhere. As president of the G7, Italy promotes constructive dialogue between governments and civil society organizations, attributing particular importance to the issue of development and equal partnership, especially on the African continent. I'm thinking of development processes and humanitarian emergency contexts where civil society organizations are often on the front line, making their specific knowledge and know-how available. This is why they are indispensable partners in our development policy. At the same time, the complexity of global challenges requires promoting ever greater coordination between all the actors involved, institutional, non-governmental, or belonging to the private sector. At a national level, this objective is also achieved through the National Council for Development Cooperation, which I brought together at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation last December. But it's a collective effort which we also promote within the work of the G7, thanks to the contribution of the official commitment group. In carrying out this work, we can count on collaboration with the United Nations Hub in Rome, the center of discussions on crucial global issues such as food security and climate change. Topics that we talked about at the Foreign Ministerial meeting in Capri and which will be explored further at the Borgo Ignazia Summit and at the Development Ministerial that I wanted to organize in the autumn in Pescara with the desire to make a concrete contribution to the solution of the many crises that affect the international agenda. At the G7 in Capri, I worked to gather consensus among partners on the need for a supportive and cohesive international response to global challenges in search of shared solutions for peace, stability, and development without leaving anyone behind and always putting the person at the center. Ensuring coherence in development and peace-building policies is therefore essential. Italy is ready to do its part. Count on me, count on the Italian government. We are so appreciative for these words, and I hope also that in this discussion today we can have some hopes for the future. When we designed this Civil 7 Summit, but especially we established and defined the different working groups of the Civil 7, we clearly felt the need to ensure consistent discussion on peace building. It was an urgent matter we would like to address and to go into details. And it was particular because I was last year in Tokyo with my esteemed colleagues who led the process last year in the Civil 7 process, and I got the clear sense that for them, nuclear disarmament, which was a working group established at the time, exactly last year, was an important topic to bring forward. And I came back to Italy, and in a discussion with my colleagues here in GCAP Italy, the national platform who is leading this process this year, we thought that it was necessary to keep going this process and this conversation and focus on nuclear disarmament by bringing then also peace building as an essential issue. That's why I'm so proud today to conclude this Civil 7 Summit with an extensive discussion and a deepened focus on peace with peace builders, with activists, and that's why I would like now, without further ado, turn on the floor to our first speaker, Cardinal Matteo Maria Zuppi. I'm checking in if he's online. I think so. Thanks a lot, Cardinal Zuppi.
Spero di essere ben connesso. Tutto un po' relativo perché sono in treno. Per cui diciamo così che bisogna sempre mettersi in movimento per cercare la pace.
Mi faccia spiegare, Cardinale, innanzitutto grazie. I'm sorry, I'm switching to Italian because Cardinal Zuppi will address the audience in Italian, but we have here Lisa Clark that I know, she will help us in the translation. Cardinale Zuppi, le chiederei di affrontare insomma le diverse questioni lentamente, interrompersi.
Grazie anche a Lisa.
Grazie, così Lisa.
Ti saluto volentieri.
Questo di rispondere lentamente non so se sarà possibile, perché spesso parliamo un po' rapidi e molto con le mani, e quindi le due cose sono complicate. Ma per non fare impazzire Lisa cercherò di parlare piano.
Grazie, Cardinale.
He said that it's not easy for him to speak slowly, and especially he's not very used to speaking without using his hands, but we only see his face here, so. Fagli la domanda in italiano.
Ok.
Fagli
Bene.
la domanda in italiano.
Farò la domanda in italiano
Bene.
e poi Lisa Clark farà la traduzione per l'audience. I will ask my question in Italian and then Lisa kindly will translate everything. Siamo qui, Cardinale, per una riflessione ampia sul concetto di pace che come società civile vogliamo portare avanti innanzitutto con un grande impegno politico. Crediamo che la pace debba essere costruita da tutti noi, chiaramente con la società civile al centro dei processi di costruzione di pace, ma che ci vuole un impegno chiaro politico. Quindi cosa possiamo fare innanzitutto per garantire le necessarie risposte a un processo di pace che sia però un processo di pace positivo e quindi non una pace costruita come risposta alla guerra, ma una pace che sia basata su un processo di cooperazione.
Here we are to reflect in a very broad manner on the notion of peace. We are civil society, but we want to express the need for a political commitment in which everyone needs to be involved. We want the political commitment to be clear. So what can we do to work towards a positive peace, not a peace that is merely an answer to war, but one that is constructive from the beginning and therefore positive?
Cardinale, a lei la parola.
Qui. Intanto grazie dell'opportunità. Penso che la questione è fondamentale per noi e per tutti.
It's a fundamental issue for us
Perché
and for
mai
everybody.
come-
Bye bye.
Perché,
Bye bye.
perché mai come questo tempo viviamo impotenza della guerra.
Never, like as much as this moment, do we see the power of war and the arrogance of war.
Le guerre sembrano godere di ottima salute, mentre la pace sembra molto quasi un'utopia.
War appears today to be the power that organizes everything, whereas peace seems to be merely a utopistic wish in the eyes of some naive people.
Siamo tornati in una logica del riarmo e che se vuoi la pace prepara la guerra, e questo a mio parere è veramente pericoloso.
We're back again into an age of rearmament. It's an arms race that's ongoing, and everybody is saying if you want peace, you've got to prepare for war, and this is truly dangerous.
Nella Costituzione italiana l'articolo 11 indica, a mio parere, un impegno che deve essere di tutti.
Che deve essere, scusa? Di tutti. The Italian Constitution has an Article 11 which repudiates war, rejects war, and this is a commitment that everybody has to abide by, in my opinion.
L'articolo dice che l'Italia ripudia la guerra, quindi non accetta che ci sia la possibilità di utilizzarla come strumento. È il ripudio proprio dello strumento, ma allo stesso tempo indica la necessità di avere di perdere sovranità per una sovranità sovranazionale capace di risolvere i conflitti.
The article of the Italian Constitution repudiates war, rejects war, and therefore refuses the notion that war can ever be a tool to be used. But at the same time, that Article 11 also says that countries, nations, need to give up a little bit of their sovereignty in order to have multilateral environment that together can solve conflicts.
Siamo in un momento in cui, al contrario, si cerca tanto di riprendere le sovranità, e questo è un'illusione.
And right now, countries are...
Le nazioni riprendono la sovranità.
It's as though they wanted to take back that sovereignty that they had in part relinquished. And this is the danger.
E gli organismi internazionali fanno una grande fatica anche perché non abbiamo fatto la manutenzione.
International organizations are going through a very difficult stage, also because we haven't been very good at doing proper maintenance over the years.
Sì, cioè abbiamo pensato che la pace ci sarebbe stata comunque e che se gli organismi venivano indeboliti questo non era un grande problema. E invece capiamo che non avere gli organismi efficaci, questo è organismi sovranazionali, a cominciare da tutta la famiglia delle Nazioni Unite, e questo è un grande problema per la pace.
We kept on thinking that peace was here and it was going to be here all the time. And we didn't really think that the weakening of the international institutions represented a problem for us. We didn't realize that allowing the institutions to not be effective as they should be, and especially those international institutions that are in the UN family, was a serious problem.
Oui. Per questo c'è bisogno di una manutenzione della pace, perché la pace non torni ad essere una tregua e che abbiamo davvero gli strumenti perché la pace sia pace, quindi capaci di risolvere i conflitti con il negoziato.
So we really need to do the proper maintenance of our international institutions, because we don't want peace just to be a truce between wars. We want it to be a real peace and a peace that can continue.
Sì, e per questo bisogna fare la manutenzione. La generazione che ci ha regalato la pace aveva chiaro che non dovevamo arrivare, che non dovevamo arrivare ad altri conflitti, che gli strumenti devono essere efficaci. Paolo VI nel suo... mi fermo qui perché sennò non ce la fai tradurre.
It is very important for peace to be properly maintained and remain to be effective. And then he was beginning to quote something that Pope Paul VI said, but he held it back for now. Adesso Paolo VI.
Che nel 4 ottobre del 65 fece un discorso importantissimo alle Nazioni Unite.
Ottobre 65. Paul VI made a very important speech in the United Nations, in the General Assembly of the United Nations, on the 4th of October of 1965. 65, vero?
Mai più contro gli altri e mai più senza gli altri.
Never again against others, and never again without the others, without others.
Ecco, io credo che dobbiamo continuare questo sforzo in cui le realtà non governative e le istituzioni collaborano insieme.
I think we need to continue along these lines, and a great effort of working together between NGOs and national institutions.
Sì, Quindi artigiani di pace e istituzioni di pace.
So we have artisans of peace, the craftsmen of peace, and institutions of peace in partnership.
L'esperienza della pace in Mozambico è stata esattamente questa.
And this is exactly what
come la comunità di Sant'Egidio, un governo e le Nazioni Unite.
And this is exactly what the experience has shown us. In Comunità di Sant'Egidio, positive peace is the collaboration between civil society and governments working towards peace.
Butosgali parlò di formula italiana per mettere assieme il formale e l'informale, l'istituzionale e il non istituzionale.
Boutros Ghali said that only an Italian could have put together the formal and the informal. I added it's the formal and the non-institutional rather than informal.
E in moltissimi conflitti che hanno delle molto profonde, questo permette alle istituzioni di essere più efficaci.
And in many conflicts, where the roots of the conflict are ancient and deep, this combination of civil society and governments and institutions allows for an easier, a more effective way of finding the solution.
Cardinale, le chiederei di avviarsi alla conclusione. Mi dispiace, io nel mio ruolo...
come quelli di oggi sono molto importanti.
And that's why meetings like the meeting today is very important. Non ti ha sentito, sai, Valeria?
Nessuno ha la chiave e dobbiamo aiutare artigiani e istituzioni a trovare la chiave della pace.
Nobody has the key to peace. And so it is our duty to help both the artisans, the craftsmen, as it were, and the institutions to look for and find the key to peace.
E questo è possibile soltanto con il dialogo e con il non accettare la guerra come la soluzione dei conflitti.
And this is possible only with dialogue and by refusing to accept that war can be the solution to conflicts.
Sì. Quindi c'è necessità di nuovi esercizi di politica e nuove forme di dialogo.
We need new forms of political involvement and new forms of dialogue.
Cardinale, io devo chiederle di andare verso la conclusione perché abbiamo qui altri panelist che devono intervenire. Mi scusi, nel mio ruolo devo anche tenere un po' i tempi e quindi la ringrazio per darci il suo ultimo messaggio. This is what happened when you are on train crossing the Apennines. I'm so sorry for that.
I forgot to translate what Valeria said. She said, "We've got to wind up. Can you please give us your final thought?" But I don't think he heard it. I don't think he's hearing any of us.
Avevo finito, era esattamente quello che volevo dire.
I had finished, and that's exactly what I wanted to say. Ti mandiamo un grande bacio.
Grazie Cardinale, io spero che lei possa continuare a seguire lungo il suo viaggio anche il nostro dibattito e intanto la ringrazio per queste parole che appunto sui quali costruiremo adesso il nostro dialogo e che ci hanno davvero ispirato. Grazie davvero. And we will continue. I was saying that, I would like to thank Cardinal Zuppi for these inspiring words and messages, and we will continue our discussion along these lines. So let me actually dive into and unpacking as well the concept of peace, common security and nuclear disarmament in this session. And let me introduce you to our distinguished speaker, Baroness Dayon Akudomvu, Council Member of International Peace Bureau and IPB Africa Network. Baroness is an advocate for quality education and youth empowerment in Africa. She leads an outreach at Akrade in the eastern region of Ghana and in remote villages in Benin. Through her outreach, she promotes and encourages the peaceful coexistence of people of diverse religious and ethnic backgrounds by inviting them to share food, distributing clothing, and organizing basic health screening. Baroness is on the board of notable non-governmental organizations that focus on youth empowerment, particularly on girl and child. She is a peace activist and a member of the Council of the International Peace Bureau, and she is currently the United Nations Federation Ambassador for Peace and Security of the West Central Africa. I would like just to underline the fact that she will bring exactly the perspective we would like to pursue. So the angle from the African continent, we talked a lot about the partnership with the African continent we would like to pursue, and also a civil-civil platform. We mentioned how essential it is to bring this voice at the center of the political debate. For you, Baroness, we mentioned already also in our recommendation how disarmament choices are essential for renewed policies for a positive peace. We have heard also from Cardinal Zuppi, and we are actually in a new era of rearmament, which is gathering pace. So, and it will mean that unfortunately, vast costs some tough decision for Western governments are taking place, and the world defense spending is reaching actually a record level. So $2.2 trillion last year. If the G7 countries spend as much as assumed, the bill for them and for everyone actually alone could reach 10 trillion in the next few years. So how can we change this perspective and what we can do to change this? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Sorry, thank you very much, Valeria. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Permit me to say thank you to Civil 7, and thank you also for inviting me. I'll go straight and focus on Africa. I'll try and be brief and put everything to the best of my power. It's heartwarming to know that at the last G7 Foreign Ministers meeting in Capri, a communique partnership with Global South, an emphasis on prioritizing Africa was high on their agenda. They also reiterated the need to take collective action to preserve peace and stability, address global challenges such as climate change, pollution, biodiversity loss, global health, education, gender inequality, poverty, food insecurity and malnutrition, violent extremism and terrorism, information integrity and digital transformation and transition that respects, protects, and promotes human rights and fundamental freedoms. Africans know what peace is, and we want peace. But with the Pact's African mind orientation, the attempt to ensure peace with each other under the aegis of the African Union is not producing the much desired results for peace in Africa. I believe that the African Union's participation in G20 and its partnership with G7, guided by the AU's Agenda 2063 and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, SDGs, and the Paris Agreement could contribute substantially to peace building in this multilateralism, so leaving no one behind. Permit me to say, colonialism and neocolonialism methods of ensuring peace in the continent has had its own challenges. Although the colonialists were required to leave Africa, some of their current foreign policies for Africa, together with those of other foreign powers, still impede the attainment of peace in the continent. And we see the results in Sudan, Niger, Mali, DR Congo Republic, and Central African Republic. Some common threats to peace in Africa is the lack of good governance, corruption, nepotism, injustice, exclusion, monetization of the political space, including buying of votes during elections. Transition of democratically elected governments is also a challenge. Climate change and discovery of new energy sources also pose a threat to common security in Africa. These interlinked with political, economical, and social concerns, having a negative impact on the sustainable peace of Africa. Severe droughts and floods have affected national economies, governance, and development, which led to many conflicts, as in the arid and semi-arid lands of Sudan, Somalia, Uganda, Kenya, and Ethiopia. Mali, Chad, and the Sahel have had their fair share of conflicts in affected areas due to short rains. Food insecurity and poverty is war for Africa. When a man is well fed and has his fair share of the national cake, you can then sit him down at a table and you reason together. The war in Sudan has claimed over 14,000 lives, with over 8 million people displaced, many facing acute food insecurity. For most of Africa, security is viewed mostly through the military lens, which actually weakens diplomacy. The adherence of African states to many international treaties shows their commitment to the process of disarmament. However, the concern of African states, I believe, is genuinely to ensure their sovereignty and to safeguard their sovereignty and territorial integrity. Though Africa was the first region to take a position on crucial disarmament, as in nuclear non-proliferation and also the first to unilaterally renounce the right to develop nuclear weapons, the region continues to witness increasing militarization with high military budgets of hundreds of millions of US dollars yearly, almost at the expense of health for all, education, food, water, and basic amenities. Ghana's budget for military spending last year was about $358 million. But who supplies the arms and weapons to Africa? Who supplies them? There is hope for world peace, and SDG's 2030 agenda is obtainable if we start now. Each and every one of us gathered here is an agent of peace. Let's harness that affinity in us to strive at world peace, especially peace in Africa and the Middle East, leaving no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Baroness, for bringing these relevant inputs and soliciting also a clear path towards peace, and especially strengthened policies on preventing transfers, which is one of our recommendations, essential to move forward towards a peaceful world. And the fragility of global peace demands the utmost urgency and concrete multilateral action. This is one of our clear recommendations and starting point of the discussion around peace, and we are channeling towards the G7 countries. And I would like now to give the floor to Sean Conner, Executive Director of International Peace Bureau. She brings his range of experiences to his peace work and activism, where he highlights the importance of intersectional coalition building, intercultural and international exchange, and strengthening of civil society. It's such a pleasure because Sean is part of the work we are doing together in this year during the Italian presidency, co-leading together with Emily Molinari and Francesco Vignarca, the Peace, Common Security and Nuclear Disarmament Working Group. And in this case, Sean, I would like to dive into a common security framework, which is one of our important and relevant part of our demands, and also give us some inputs regarding the importance and relevance of grassroots peace builders in every aspect of conflict resolution and peace building. Thanks a lot. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Valeria. I would like to start briefly by just mentioning that today, May 15th, is among several days, some of which have been mentioned here before, but it is also the International Conscientious Objectors Day. Conscientious objection is the legitimate right to the freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, and to object to fighting and dying and killing in wars. This is a very important part of peace work, is that we have the rights in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to resist war and to say, no, we will not fight. So just briefly to mention that at the beginning here. Now I'd like to mention a quote from the new Agenda for Peace Antonio Guterres had released last year to paint the picture of where the world is now. We are now at an inflection point. The post-Cold War period is over. A transition is underway to a new global order. While its contours remain to be defined, leaders around the world have referred to multipolarity as one of its defining traits. In this moment of transition, power dynamics have become increasingly fragmented as new poles of influence emerge, new economic blocs form, and axes of contestation are redefined. There is greater competition among major powers and a loss of trust between the global north and south. A number of states increasingly seek to enhance their strategic independence while trying to maneuver across existing dividing lines. I think the previous speakers have also brought this to the forefront, and it emphasizes really the urgency of this moment before it's too late. After the Second World War in particular, there was a change in the understanding of issues of peace and security around the world as inextricably linked, that threats in any part of the world can have global repercussions. In the post-Cold War era of globalization, aided by new technologies, integrated global markets, and ease of travel and communication, this has become even more true. From this realization rose the United Nations, tasked with the maintenance of international peace and security, the promotion of well-being of peoples around the world, and international cooperation. Yet it seems we're as far as ever from achieving these intended purposes. The G7 Italy 2024 Foreign Minister Statement from Capri on addressing global challenges and fostering partnerships acknowledges a commitment to upholding the humanitarian and international law, including the UN Charter and human rights and dignity for all. It acknowledges the need for collective action to preserve peace and stability and to address global challenges: climate change, pollution, biodiversity loss, global health, education, gender inequality, food insecurity, violent extremism and terrorism, information integrity, and digital transition. These are all of the themes that they mentioned in this. The G7 is committed to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and meeting the SDGs, and puts the blame on COVID and major conflicts for preventing the achievement or close to the achievement. While it's encouraging to read that they have these commitments, they have these same commitments year after year, and yet we see we're farther than ever and moving in the wrong direction. New conflicts are breaking out, so when we talk about peace, we see that their commitments are the exact opposite of what we need. Furthermore, old conflicts are never resolved. Just a couple of recent examples we can look at where the G7 has had a particular role and where they continue to speak about them. One is Libya. It was destabilized by a NATO military intervention in 2011. 13 years on, it's one of the top points in the G7 foreign ministers' statement, and the conflict is protracted with no end in sight. Ukraine, we are now more than 2 years into the conflict and continuing, despite billions of dollars of weapons transfers and sales to Ukraine and these commitments of the G7 leaders, the war drags on with no signs of ending and no diplomatic conversations. And of course, Gaza, where several countries of the G7 lead the way in the weapons transfers to Israel that have resulted in the deaths of 34,000 or more Gazans, and the violence again continues with no signs of resolution. From the Horn of Africa to Sudan, the DRC, Myanmar, South China Sea or West Philippine Sea, and beyond, the approaches the G7 are taking are simply not working. So why aren't they working? There are certainly many reasons for this, and it's impossible to go into all of them here or to say there's a single or even 5, 10 causes for these. Of course, these problems are very complicated. But let's look at a few points of what the G7 are doing now. On one hand, the G7 highlights working with partners, mentioned 40 times in the 2024 Foreign Ministers' Declaration. While this is seemingly good to include more partners in these conversations, not limiting it just to 7 countries, it is also in many ways exclusionary. It creates an us versus them mentality of our partners, those who we're willing to work with, those who we share common values with, and those that we don't. Naming and shaming bad actors and seeking to win influence over some countries at the expense of another, it exacerbates global polarization and deeply impacts the future world order, setting up the scene for a new Cold War to take place. Instead, we need to push for global cooperation, even with those who we disagree with and where we may at first glance, not have shared values with those countries. And we need to be able to address all of these challenges laid out in the G7 foreign minister statement together. The alternative is to increase tensions towards military confrontation with adversaries. This has been the status quo of the G7 and Western governments whose doctrines based on peace through strength and provocative military exercises and alliances have done little to resolve neither violent conflicts nor the vast array of non-violent threats addressed by the G7. On one hand, the return to great power competition risks complete nuclear annihilation, as has already been on display with Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine. Whether or not there are active rhetorical threats of the use of nuclear weapons, as long as they exist, there will always be the threat of either purposeful, accidental, or even terrorist non-governmental actor use of these weapons. And in any of those cases, the consequences are devastating and global. The G7 also spends 1.232 trillion US dollars, as I had briefly mentioned yesterday, on the military. That's their military spending. 7 countries making up over half of all global military expenditure. At the same time, as mentioned previously, an arms race is well underway and is being led by new weapons technologies, from autonomous weapons systems to unmanned aerial vehicles or drones, and technologies in space. These remain or under-regulated in all cases and pose vast ethical concerns and contribute to new and alarming risks, particularly around nuclear security, as these could directly target command and control systems. The vast pace of militarization siphons funding for the G7 promises that they have made for climate adaptation, loss and damage for the most affected countries from climate change, all while the G7 also are the historic polluters. We must note that a recent report by Scientists for Global Responsibility and the Conflict Environmental Observatory estimates that militaries across the globe also count for 5.5% of greenhouse gas emissions. If it were a country, that would be the 4th largest country in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. There's also a climate collateral reports by the Transnational Institute, Tipping Point North-South, and Stop Wapenhandel in the Netherlands, which clearly identifies that the richest countries, Annex II countries in US climate talks, spend about 30 times as much on their armed forces as they spend on providing climate finance. The SDGs are in desperate need of a rescue plan. The UN has estimated that the world will need to spend between 3 and 5 trillion US dollars annually in order to meet the SDGs by 2030. And if the G7 truly has this commitment, as they have said in the foreign minister statement, then they need to prove it and they need to put that funding there. And it's very clear, if we look at the money, where the priorities currently lie. So I've outlined the problems, but what can be done differently? If global security is truly interlinked, like we have recognized, then global solutions also must be. That's the fundamental basis of the concept of common security. No state or bloc of states can be secure at the expense of other states. Rivalries between states must be managed in a spirit of cooperation leading the way. Common security is based on 6 fundamental principles: a focus on individual and human security, trust between nations and peoples, disarmament and nuclear abolition, global and regional cooperation, dialogue, confidence building measures and prevention, and finally, international law, regulation, and responsible governance. Taking into account the changing world order, this is now more important than ever. These new fractures and divides and tensions will exacerbate existing conflicts and increase the risk of new conflicts breaking out. First and foremost, the C7 must ensure the universality and impartiality of international law and international institutions. There is a strong and to a large degree justified sentiment in the world that rich Western countries, and in particular the G7, have enjoyed and benefited the greatest from international institutions and have not been held to the same standards. The G7 likes to talk about a rules-based international order. Then they must prove that these rules equally apply to them and everyone else through good faith reforms and more equitable international institutions. This requires reforms of global governance across all levels. Furthermore, the presence of nuclear weapons creates an inherent global imbalance that can only be overcome through their abolition. The global divide is further illustrated by the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which the G7 has yet to recognize, let alone sign or ratify, despite the treaty being supported and led primarily by the Global South. Of course, given that the G7 alone are not the only possessors of nuclear weapons, this is something that needs to be done, again, in a spirit of cooperation with others. Emerging technologies have to be regulated, and we have to use all and every manner possible of building trust, as it is the most essential component to common security. A lack of trust creates feelings of mutual insecurity between adversary countries, which can lead to a vicious cycle of mistrust and escalation of tensions, leading us further into an arms race. Reduced military expenditures, forums on exchange of communication, transparency, and cooperation on points of common concerns, such as climate change, can also work to enhance trust. How am I doing for time? It's, should I?
Yeah.
Okay. Quickly to conclude here, only when the G7 recognizes that global security is inextricably linked and requires common solutions and cooperation can we move toward peaceful conflict resolution and global justice. From civil society, this is our call to the G7. You cannot create peace through war, you cannot create cooperation through confrontation, and you cannot create security if it is not common security for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean, for flagging on the cooperation and collaboration, which is another essential call to the G7. It's indeed our clear understanding of the role of the G7 is exactly to give an example and strengthen especially the multilateral process. So this is relevant for us, as we are sure G7 are not the global government, and we cannot just consider them as a leaders and make all of the decision regarding the global issues. So this is relevant for us. We will continue also and try to make clear this message, although building on a clear conversation and especially try to make diplomacy and sustainable peace a reality. Now let me turn on Lisa Pelletti-Clark, first of all by thanking her for the translation with Cardinal Zuppi. That's much appreciated. Lisa Clark is a former co-president of the International Peace Bureau and currently vice president of Beati I Costruttori di Pace, which is a member of the Italian Peace and Disarmament Network. It's a great pleasure, Lisa, to have you here. A commitment to peace and non-violence was developed especially in the 90s when she lived in Sarajevo. Lisa was later involved in peace reconciliation projects in several other contexts, including Kosovo and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And more recently, she has been active in nuclear disarmament campaigns, both nationally and internationally. And exactly on nuclear disarmament, I would like you to go into details by also building on, first of all, recalling all of us of our main recommendation to the G7, as we are asking for reaffirming the G7 position that the use or threat of nuclear weapons used by any actor is unacceptable. So, Lisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Valeria. Thank you very much. Thank you also for giving me the opportunity to translate Cardinal Zuppi, who is an old friend I've known for at least 30 years. But I couldn't hear him very well, but that's okay. I have been asked here, I thank you everybody, all the people who've worked for the Civil 7, congratulations. I think we've come up with a very, very good communique. I have been asked to speak here on the issue of nuclear disarmament. And as you have already heard in several other meetings, almost exactly a year ago, the G7 leaders proclaimed their commitment to achieving a world without nuclear weapons with undiminished security for all. It was their Hiroshima vision on nuclear disarmament statement. And of course, we can only commend that statement. And while we urge the G7 to reiterate that commitment in this year's declaration, we cannot conceal that we would hope that they can further build upon those words with actions. Our networks and movements are for the most part inspired by the methods of active nonviolence and the principle of human security. This has led us to examine the issues of peace and disarmament from the point of view of the consequences of the use of weapons, in our case of nuclear weapons. In this effort, we are deeply indebted to a number of hibakusha, women and men who survived the United States atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. I am getting old and am very tired, said my friend Seiko Ikeda some years ago, but I cannot die until the world abolishes nuclear weapons, she said. She was 12 when her city, Hiroshima, was razed to the ground by a little boy. Every time she told her story, she relived that experience. But she was willing to feel the pain again and again if this could stop other cities, other nations from going through the same tragedy. She traveled all over the world to tell her story, to warn against complacency and to plead with young and old, saying, nuclear weapons and human beings cannot coexist on this planet. We must get rid of them, or they will get rid of us. Thanks to Seiko-san and the stories of many other survivors organized in the Nihon Hidankyo network, experts from all walks of life, scientists, physicians, lawyers, journalists, to name but a few, have collaborated with human rights activists in producing realistic models of the consequences of nuclear weapons in today's world. Although the number of nuclear weapons in the arsenals of the 9 nuclear weapon states are now down to just over 12,000, from the more than 70,000 at the height of the Cold War, the devastation their use could cause would truly jeopardize civilization as we know it. Indeed, the survival of our species. For this reason, the statement by G7 leaders last year was welcomed. It recalls the joint statement by the 5 nuclear weapon states on the 3rd of January 2022, affirming that nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. That was first said in the 1980s by Reagan and Gorbachev, but they got more things done than this lot has, but anyway. But that statement also praises the Non-Proliferation Treaty as the cornerstone not only of the global non-proliferation regime, but also as the foundation for the pursuit of nuclear disarmament because of its Article 6. But the G7 statement further affirms that as long as they exist, nuclear weapons should serve defensive purposes, deter aggression, and prevent war and coercion. Respectfully, we would ask the G7 to consider the evidence that deterrence policies and actions are actually threats of the use of nuclear weapons. Even in self-defense, international humanitarian law requires that any threat and especially the use of nuclear weapons, must meet the criteria of necessity and proportionality. And while Russia's threat to use nuclear weapons against any NATO state daring to interfere with their special military operation was blatantly an illegitimate, illegal threat, violation of the UN Charter, today, the deterrence doctrines, also by G7 states, can be interpreted as threats of the use of nuclear weapons, and many eminent jurists have. Earlier this year, on 24th of February, G7 foreign ministers reiterated that Russia's threats to use nuclear weapons are inadmissible. We would encourage the G7 to acknowledge the risks inherent in the deterrence policies of the nuclear weapon states among their members. Furthermore, we hope that the G7, since it has voiced support for strengthening the United Nations in view of addressing the challenges to international security and the changing international environment, will acknowledge the need for increased multilateral cooperation, including with the G20, but especially within the overall structure of the United Nations. It is urgent to resume, as we have written in the communiqué, to resume negotiations on nuclear arms reductions, to eliminate all weapons of mass destruction, as agreed in Article 6 of the NPT, and to resume strategic stability talks between US and Russia and dialogue with China. And as Sean Connor has just told us, that what we need is common security as a doctrine. It was very well explained by Sean, but I summarize it in simple terms. My security cannot be obtained to the detriment of yours. And this is something that must be a rule. We teach it to small children in kindergarten. I don't see why adult white men can't use it. Most of our civil society organizations active in the field of peace, disarmament, and common security are members of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. And under ICANN's umbrella, which I respectfully submit guarantees far greater security than any nuclear umbrella, under ICANN's umbrella, we have worked to achieve the entry into force of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Thanks to information on the reality of nuclear weapons and their consequences, we established a network of organizations disseminated throughout all continents. Through the collaboration of such wonderfully diverse groups, we have understood that a multilateral constituency means sharing the same goal, each of us providing our specific viewpoint and insight. For we understood that the goal we were working towards would benefit all, common security at work. The diversity of our coalition has been enriching. We have learned about the heavy toll that nuclear weapons cause to women and children at all stages of the nuclear endeavor, from uranium mining to testing to genetic alterations through the generations due to radioactivity. And this is reflected in Articles 6 and 7 of the TPNW, victim assistance, environmental remediation, and international cooperation. We have learned and meditated on the fact that the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were not simply collateral damage, but that their destruction was intentional. And likewise, that all major strategic nuclear weapons today are still aimed at the world's major cities. Cities are not targets. International humanitarian law prohibits the targeting of non-combatants. This is something that we wish to reiterate to the three members of the P5, the three nuclear member states of the Security Council that are in the G7. Explaining this has made it possible to create a vast network of support among cities. Mayors for Peace has promoted the idea of a treaty since the 1980s. In Italy, there are more than 500 member cities, and over 200 city councils have approved resolutions. I'm getting there, I'm getting there. I know the time is short. But cities, you know, they are the targets of nuclear weapons, and it's essential that they be involved, the institution level between the non-governmental and the institutional is the local government level, and that is essential. Our network includes trade unions, professional federations, and also the world's major religions. I'd like to point out, although we had Cardinal Zuppi on earlier, that the role of the Holy See has been especially important because Pope Francis has changed has revolutionized, I would say, the doctrine of the Catholic Church since he became Pope. He has stated that it's not just immoral to use nuclear weapons, it's immoral to possess them, because by possessing nuclear weapons, you make multilateral diplomatic negotiations impossible, because someone who has sitting there with his nuclear weapons is not an equal in a multilateral setting. And so this is extremely important, and it has been the change. It has meant everything for us in realizing and the entry into force of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. One last thing, only one G7 country attended the 2 meetings of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons States Parties conferences as an observer state, so certainly our organizations recommend that the G7 participate in the future. But I would like to add on a positive note, I can't end on such a negative, aggressive note towards the G7. In 2010, I'm older than most of you, but 2010 wasn't that long ago, there was an action plan approved at the review conference of the Non-Proliferation Treaty at the UN in New York. And the wording was, the total elimination of nuclear weapons constitutes the only absolute guarantee against the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons. And all of the countries in the G7, all of the 190 countries that are parties, state parties to the Non-Proliferation Treaty agreed to that. I know we can't turn back the clock of history, but reflecting for a moment on where we were a mere 14 years ago may help us find a way to work out how we can revive the spirit that inspired so much hope for the future in all of us then. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for these strong messages. You brought a lot of elements. I would like to go and pick all of them, but it's quite impossible because we are running short of time. But the interconnections, the different levels, the engagement, and once again, the collaboration is the most important part to make peace a reality indeed. Let me also to thank the Director General Chu Dong-yu for joining us for the closing remarks. Thanks a lot. Director General, we are running short on time. Just, I would like just to have a quick remarks from the panelists, and then yes, I will give you the floor, okay, if you allow me. Yes, please. Thank you so much, because it's indeed for a relevant question I would like to ask the three of you, as we are here by flagging the fact that civil society is relevant and is relevant in all of the policy making process, but it's also an integral part of the peace building process we mentioned already. So I would like just to hear from you what what is your proposal and what is essential for us to do to pave the way for peace building and to make peace a reality. So quite challenging, I know, but please, the floor is yours. I will start with Sean beforehand.
So I think, okay, we're good. It connects to one point I had to leave out of my speech here that I would like to highlight. And to start with the quote that if the only tool you have is a hammer, you see every problem as a nail. And I think right now that the G7 in many cases sees the hammer or military responses as the only responses to create peace. I think it is civil society's job to remind our governments that other tools exist, to share with them new tools that perhaps they didn't have in the past, and to really emphasize there are plenty of other ways to resolve conflicts, especially involving civil society directly in that. When civil society, and particularly women in marginalized communities, are involved in peace processes, they are much more likely to succeed and to be sustainable. So by reminding them that we are a tool that they can use and that they should use us, that we are there and ready for that, I think that's the key role that we can play. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Lisa.
The only thing I can recommend to the G7 governments is that they look more seriously at the progress that the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is making. It is now approved and ratified by 70 countries, but many more than that are in the process of ratification. It is built on the idea that there must be cooperation on all aspects. There is plenty of room for cooperation by countries that have not signed and not ratified. I have the experience, I'm old, I have the experience of the Convention to Ban Landmines, which the United States has still not ratified, yet the United States is the biggest, I think, the biggest world donor on mine action, on demining actions in the context of the Convention on Landmines. So it can be done to sit in on the meetings as an observer state, but also collaborating on especially Articles 6 and 7, which are the ones I mentioned, which are based on victims' assistance, environmental remediation. We've said this to Italy under several governments. None of them have taken us up on this, but Italy has such wonderful capacities and competences in this field that we feel that that's where they should be.
Thank you, Lisa. And now, Baroness, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I would say G7 must focus its resources into addressing the root cause of violence and aggression and conflicts, and then also in Africa and Global South. And then also they must, our governments in Africa must empower the civil society organizations and advocates also to get involved in alternate conflict resolution through diplomacy and agreements, negotiations. And I think G7 can help insist that on African governments, because they don't want to know anything about CSOs coming up and telling them or trying to help do the right thing to curb violence and war. I think it's very important that we have that mutual togetherness to move the common security and peace building. Thank you.
Thanks a lot also to Baroness. We will make the most of it, and I would say that Now this panel is closed, so we are going to a conclusion. I would like just to flag once again the fact that the collaboration has turned out is the main element to achieve a sustainable peace and steady peace. Thanks a lot to all of you, because you gave us a level of nuances and inputs which are truly indispensable to move our collective work together. And now it's my honor to leave the floor to the Director General, Chu Dong-yu, thanking him once again, first of all, for hosting us. It's a great pleasure for us. We had a vibrant discussion, also thanks to your help and your support. So, Director General, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, it's a pleasure to meet all of you. You are from different parts of the world, and also with a passion to help this broken society back to the peaceful society. We need different stakeholders to work together. That's why you can trace my first initiative in FAO when I arrived here 1st of August 2019, and then 9th of September 2019, I proposed first initiative is a hand-in-hand initiative. And it clearly stated that we wanted to work not only with the government officials, bureaucrats. Of course, by nature, FAO is an intergovernmental specialized agency. So you can see all the governing bodies represented by the government officials from the Ministry of Agriculture or Minister of Foreign Affairs or others. And that's running more than 75 years before I came. And then through the hand-in-hand initiative, after 4.5 years now, we changed the FAO from the purely bureaucratic organization, become open and a new, agile, flat organization. More efficient, more inclusive, more effective, of course, more equitable. That's why the hand-in-hand issue, we said we have 5 key partners. One is the government officials, second is the private sector, third is the international organization, and the fourth is the academia, institutions, and last but not least, the civil society. And that's why 2 years ago, first also I chair here, first also the civil society meeting here. We need to build the more inclusive approach to have FAO, have members finally on the ground to transform agro-food systems together. Because agro-food system not only for food, for feed, for fuel, and for fiber, of course, clothes, cotton, fiber crops, and oils, and others. And also rural development. But say my almost 41 years experience with rural affairs. All the country, including the most developed country, city country, or developing big country, we have 2 societies. Italy also, China, United States, or small island. One is an urban society. You have a lot of investment, good transportation, a lot of people stay, and all the food supplies here, and you can enjoy your entertainment, so-called modern life. And then you have another society. It's countryside society or rural society. It's just across from here to any direction of the Rome, 20 kilometers away from here, from the hard land of here, Secolo Maxima. You can reach the rural areas of Italy. And that's another society. The infrastructure is different, and the livelihood are different. So that's why we want to transform agro-food systems and have the rural areas. That's the mandate of FAO, not only for food security and for rural development. Of course, we have to work together with the government and with also civil society, especially for rural affairs. When I was a local leader in China for 7.5 years, also we work with the civil society to have the rural areas. One civil society or NGOs, you can have small things, and they make big. Let's we Chinese says, proverb says that if you added one small wood, you will make a bigger fire together. Yeah, that's the rural society. We need you, civil society, more, because the government couldn't, any government in the world, you couldn't cover all the challenges from rural areas. In the city, it's much easier because the limited land, every resources are more or less available. But the rural areas, who care? And the marginal, even indigenous areas, mountainous area, even more challenge. So that's why the hand-in-hand initiative is a real methodology philosophy change. Now I wanted to explain after 4.5 years, together with my colleague here, chief economist. We spent 1 month to design this, and then we bring the World Food Forum during the pandemic here. First is the hybrid. I still remember that the fashion singer from the United States, we are four betters. They sing for the four betters, FAO's new strategy framework. Yeah, and also he was a advocate for the SDGs. So SDGs number 17 is a partnership. Hand-in-hand initiative is materialized the partnership. Because a lot of people talk about partnership, it's just theoretically. You should find the proper approach to reach the vulnerable country, vulnerable region, vulnerable community. So that's why I know I welcome you to come here, because if you come help us, you are one of my allies. Yeah, of course you have a different view, but when you say peace, without a peace, you couldn't create the real peace without food. Yeah, you can ask anyone, no food for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, they are still not angry with you, even your kids. Yeah? So the food is the basic human rights. You talk about the human rights, I know. I had a very holy dialogue with the Holy Father. Every year, I'm so fortunate to have a chance to listen to his wise guidance, share the big passion together. I said, you are talking about the religion freedom. Yes, it's up the desk. We are talking about the basic human rights on the ground. That's what the difference we are talking about. Yeah, the basic human rights should be having enough food for everyone, everywhere, with safe food, safe food. Now, some food is not so safe even. Not only pollution, accessibility, affordability. Even during past pandemics, 4 years, there are a lot of rich countries. About 10% people, they don't have affordability to purchase the qualified food. That's the reality. So I really thank all of you come and your voice, especially when I saw the C7. Yeah, rightly push the G7 leaders, take a leading role, support you, support the FAO. I should be appreciated since I can. All the G7 countries support me, especially Italy, the support FAO changed during past 4 years. At the beginning, some colleagues stay here more than 20 years and say, Italy is poor. I said, no, Italy is one of the G7. You are rich, South Korea or Singapore, you're not one of the G7. So don't worry, the Italians, they have enough money if they're willing to do something together. They do, they did. They successfully and willing, voluntarily supported the change every year. All the changes, of course, not only from Italy, from all the members, especially from top 20 members. G7 is one of the top, of course. Yeah. Number 1 is America. Number 2 is China. Number 3 is Japan. Number 4 is Germany. Number 5 is British. Number 6 is the French. And number 7 is Italy. And then the Spain or Korea or Mexico, you know, and others, Canada. So I think we want to build the real solidarity to tackle the common challenges together. Use all the tools in toolbox, based on the science, based on data, based on the fact. I also encourage all of you. You want to convince the politician to support you? You should bring the data, scientific evidence. And then I think no matter poor or rich countries, if they're willing to support you, they have a tools. I never consider the poor countries that have no money. Sometimes poor countries, the politicians, if they understood well, even they have more quick reaction to support you. So let's work together and to make this world a little bit better tomorrow than yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you, Director General, for these appreciated words. You mentioned an inclusive approach. You mentioned solidarity and responsibility, which are clear and key words of our process, clearly established the centrality of human rights. So thanks a lot also for calling us and greater and better collaboration. We are very much looking forward to continue our discussion and collaboration again. And before leaving the floor to our colleague from Canada, I would like to ask our chair, Civil 7 Chair, Riccardo Moro, to join us and just address final closing remarks. Wherever.
Yeah, just some words that sound as conclusion of this panel, but more than then as conclusion of these 2 days before leaving the floor to our friend Darren. And remembering what we said yesterday, opening the meeting, you remember that yesterday we saw the video we prepare and our motto, just justice. And I started saying, but what is justice? And I made reference to the view that we have from your wonderful terrace on the 11th floor, or on the 8th floor here in the FAO.
That's Italian government owned.
Oh.
We are fortunate to use them free, pay €1 a year.
But anyway, this way the view is shared, and from that floor. But even from the street, we can see the Circus Maximus, and the hills, the walls of the Palatine Hills. And using this reference, I took the definition of justice that Ulpiano's gave us as legacy, saying that justice is when rights are recognized to each. And starting from that, we developed together reflection on human rights, delivering the communiqué to the Italian government, to the presidency of the G7 of this year, and developing the content of that communiqué, that are the reflection on the protection and on what is missing in terms of protection of human rights today in the world, with the reflection on policy coherence yesterday afternoon, a reflection on the financial challenges we have, and we did it this morning. And speaking about financial issues, we mentioned taxation. And taxation, we said, is a way to build citizenships. Taxes are paid by citizens. And when you pay taxes, that means that you have rights and you are fulfilling duties. And we have spoken about debt. And debt is something that has to do with relations of trust. Then we passing through a lot of dedicated session to thematics, to sectors, to specific topics, we landed on this final session on peace. And peace is fundamentally an issue of relations, of broken relations that have to be repaired. And so, thinking about that, and thinking about the first definition of justice that we tried to provide together, I would like to add a different, a further definition of justice. And it is a definition of justice based on the idea of relations. That is, in fact, the idea of justice that is found in the so-called restorative justice. I prefer speaking about restorative justice than speaking about transitional justice, because it seems that transitional justice is something that it is relevant just during the transition, while I think that this is a sort of permanent idea and very powerful idea of justice. That is that we have justice if we have relations. That sounds a bit strange. What does it mean? We have justice if we have, in a community, in our world, humanizing relations. And again, maybe we don't understand what it can mean exactly. But let's think about that in the opposite way. Injustice is the breaking, the violation of a relation. If I steal the cell phone of the Director General when he is here, I not only breaking the relation we have together bilaterally, but I also, can I say, breaking, the weakening, the common relation of trust we have here. I have my phone on the desk. If when I will go back to my desk, I won't find the desk. We have some students of university. If you leave something on your desk and you don't find it when you go back from toilet or whatever, you will think, we will start thinking, oh gosh, this place is not safe. And trust is fundamental for the life of a community. So this idea of justice based on relation is an idea that says that to build justice, we have to build again relations. When a relation is broken, we have to build again that relation. That is making again the relation. A sanction, a punishment, is not restoring the relation. Is the idea of justice based on retribution. That is an interesting idea that is found in the market, for instance, but it doesn't it doesn't heal the results of the violation of a relation. So the idea of the restorative justice is precise to help people who thinks that they are enemies to come back and speaking together and saying, yesterday in a very interesting session on the situation between Israel and Palestine, we've spoken about the issue of be accountable. That means that we have to say, I did that, I made that, and I suffered for that. This is something that we've learned by our friends from South Africa, from the restorative process in South Africa. They met and they, sitting together, started saying, I did that, and I suffered from that. And saying that is something extremely powerful that can restore again the relation, then can create the condition to build again a relation. And in that sense, I say that the justice we want is a condition in which we nourish every day humanizing relations. Humanizing relation means relations that take care of the dignity of the other human being. Sometimes in the market, we have relations that are not respecting the dignity of the other. We don't have relation even in international politics that are not taking care of the dignity of the other. This is one of the risks, even of the format of the G7. We said yesterday to the Sherpa, at the UN, we all feel at home. And this is an issue, a matter of dignity of all. So we tried these 2 days to do this, to together build relations, reflecting on what we can do for our world in a positive way. And remember what Cardinal Zuppi said about never again against someone, but never again without the others. We try to do it together. So we are here ending these 2 days with this spirit, and having done that, I think that we did it. I have the duty to thank the FAO who made for us possible to meet here. I have the duty to thank the UN SDG Action Campaign that made possible for many of you to be here with us. And even the UBI, an organization in Italy, the Buddhist Union of Italy, who helped us, who supported the process. And we have to thank all the people who attended the work, the activities of our working group since the beginning of the year, and especially the members of the steering group. That means all the coordinators of the working groups and the representative of the national platforms of the C7. But let me thank also especially the Secretariat who helped us in doing that, and particularly let me name them Andrea and Dario, Andrea Bosio and Dario Lo Scalzo, who are here. And I cannot end this closing remark without thanking Valeria. Valeria, I said that yesterday, Valeria kept on her not so big shoulders all the burden of this work, and it would have not been possible to have that without her. Really, really, thank you, Valeria. And Just one final question or final doubt. Are we successful? Sometimes it seems that we are not successful. I think that what we are doing is helping in changing the culture, changing the view. We are not successful maybe immediately, but we are providing, making some change. And I think that this is important. So the second question is, if we are not so clearly successful, if things are difficult, if we'll be tired yeah, when everything seems lost as the war make things appear, will we give up? No. The answer is simple. Together we will never give up. Never. Thank you to never give up with us.
Thank you, Riccardo, for your kind words. The process will continue, of course, not today, but tomorrow. We need to keep the momentum going and also work on the different ministerial meetings. We have the G7 Leaders Summit and so on. But now we have a short video just with a few moments of the two-day summit. Thank you. Thanks a lot. You captured all of the moments. You gave us exactly the sense of the vibrant discussion we had. I would like once again to thank our panelists for the fruitful discussion. Just the last picture together, photo opportunity together, and as we would like also to deliver our Civil 7 communique. Okay. And then I would like Darren to take the podium. Thank you.
Thank you.
Daron, the floor is yours.
Thanks, everybody. What a great panel. And what a great 2 days. I had a lot of fun and learned a lot of things, so I'm happy to have been invited, and congratulations and thank you to the organizers and to everybody. They did a wonderful job. So my name is Darren Seller-Peretz from Cooperation Canada, and we are the national network representing Canadian NGOs working in international development and humanitarian assistance. So as we draw this inspiring C7 summit to a close, I'm filled with a mix of anticipation and reflection. So the upcoming G7 presidency, I'm already looking to 2025, coupled with Cooperation Canada's leadership as the C7 chair, it's both an incredible opportunity and a weighty responsibility. So this underscores our commitment to fostering global cooperation and our unwavering dedication to driving positive change on a global scale. So the past 2 days have been filled with enriching discussions and valuable insights. I'm excited about what we can achieve together, but I'm also mindful of the challenges we face. So with continued cooperation and a shared commitment to progress, I'm confident that we can all together navigate these challenges. So reflecting on the journey that has brought us here, I'm reminded of the invaluable connections that have been forged along the way. I think this was mentioned, but I want to really reiterate this. The summit served as a powerful reminder of the importance of collaboration and open dialogue in addressing the most pressing global dilemmas of our time. So these connections extend across many levels, right? Between civil society and governments, between countries, both within and beyond the G7, and across various thematic priorities. Yet fundamentally, it is connections between people, individuals, strengthened in spaces like these, like the summit, and the various C7 processes that truly drive meaningful change. It is through these personal relationships that we can effect lasting change and chart a course toward a more just, equitable, and sustainable future. Of course, we must acknowledge that not everyone enjoys the same freedoms, the same privileges and freedoms that we are afforded in this gathering today. As is becoming increasingly prevalent in many parts of the world, civil society faces unprecedented challenges, from crackdowns on dissent to the silencing and jailing of journalists and human rights defenders through the erosion of fundamental rights and freedoms. So it is our duty to amplify their voices by bringing the affected people to the table, to stand in solidarity with them, and to advocate for human rights around the world. So now, as I look to next year's process already, next year's C7 process, Cooperation Canada remains steadfast in its commitment to amplifying the voices and bringing these voices to the table of civil society and championing the values that we share. As Canada prepares to take on the role of 2025 G7 President and Cooperation Canada that of the chair, the C7 chair, we are eager to build upon and work closely with those that came before us and those that will follow as well. So our vision is to cultivate a thriving global platform for civil society, fostering collaboration among partners worldwide, and ensuring G7 governments are held accountable. Inspired by Italy's very warm hospitality, we look forward to hosting our C7 colleagues and partners from the Global South to Canada next year, and hopefully in one of our very few warmer months. We continue to view the C7 as a vibrant forum where civil society organizations and stakeholders worldwide can engage in dialogue with G7 member governments. So our ongoing commitment to amplify the voices and bring them to the table of global civil society, presenting impactful proposals and advocating for measures that champion environmental protection, foster social and economic development, promote universal well-being, ensure gender equality, uphold human rights, and adhere to the principle of inclusivity. Through this crucial work, we strive to influence G7 positions and actively contribute to the efforts in economic, environmental, and social domains. So our collaboration with Canadian government will be guided by a few core principles: timely, open and inclusive, transparent, informative, and iterative multi-stakeholder engagement. This approach will ensure that we can effectively advocate throughout this upcoming year, throughout 2025. So building upon the momentum garnered by Italy this year and Japan last year, we will work with both our government counterparts and our peers around the world to identify shared policy priorities in the months ahead. So to guide our partnership with the Canadian government, in addition to the summit, we are looking to capitalize on the different relevant ministerial meetings as strong inroads to influence the direction of the presidency. While I'm already looking to 2025, I think Valeria mentioned it earlier, I want to remind everyone that there's still ample opportunity to advocate for the priorities set forth in the C7 communiqué during Italy's remaining time as G7 president. So Italy's leadership has set a strong course, and it's essential that we continue to advance them for the coming months. We're committed to work alongside Italy and other partners to ensure that these commitments translate into tangible and positive impact. So in closing, this summit and the broader C7 process have highlighted the interconnected nature of our world and the critical need for coherent policymaking. It's also reinforced the vital role of civil society as the conscience of our society, holding governments and institutions accountable to their commitments, as well as advocating for the rights and freedoms of all individuals, regardless of their background or circumstances. So as I leave you here today, I hope you carry with you the understanding that collaboration is the key to addressing the pressing issues of our time. Coordinated action is not just desirable. It's essential to drive positive change and build a more inclusive and sustainable future for all. So my sincere thanks goes out to all the participants, as well as to the organizers and the FAO, and for Italy for hosting us this week. So I hope to see many of you in 2025 in Canada, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Truly our warmest thanks. Thanks a lot for these inspiring words, Darren. And yes, we need to continue our engagement. And this Civil 7 Summit 2024 is officially closed.